Hi, I want to show you a proposed structure of what the future of spiritual life will look like at Liberty University, a structure that has at its core the experience of a student. But before I get into those details, let's rewind a bit and look at 1, where we were this time last year, and 2, where we're at today, and then 3, that future proposal. This time last year, if you looked at the landscape of spiritual life at LU, you'd have found that there were 4 primary departments, 4 vice presidents if you would, that were responsible for just about all the co-curricular spiritual life activity of the school. So in the spring of 2015, an executive leadership team was formed to evaluate all this. What was undeniable were 2 glaring issues. When it came to the spiritual life landscape at LU, there was 1, inconsistent messaging, and 2, inefficient use of university resources. See, the problem was each of those 7 departments was independent of one another. What this meant for the student across the landscape was that there were multiple different voices shouting at them for attention, and the departments that were larger were shouting the loudest. The problem was inconsistent messaging. There wasn't one voice telling a student about spiritual life opportunities and the different expressions. There were multiple ones, each with their own niche. The other problem was inefficient use of university resources. Because each of these 7 departments was a self-sustaining entity responsible for every aspect of their own mission, the staff structure and the budgets for each of them was built accordingly. So at the end of May, the leadership team tasked with overseeing this recognized it made sense to realign all the co-curricular spiritual life of the school under the campus pastor, David Nasser. At least now there was central oversight. At least now there was some measure of accountability. The bigger vision, though, was to centralize spiritual life so that there were not 7 bodies, but instead one body with different parts, all serving the bigger picture. And that bigger picture is, of course, the student. So the new proposed structure of spiritual life wouldn't look like this. It would look like this. Starting in the center, from the question, what is best for a student, all spiritual life would flow out of this 4-tiered system. At the top, spiritual development would continue to provide management and oversight of all of it. The next level would be heavily administrative departments that serve as filters for all different expressions of a student's experience. For example, LU Send, a newly created department, is set up to be the filter for all student group travel. That means from a spiritual life standpoint, no longer is any single department handling the logistics of their own travel. Now all travel funnels through one group who is tasked with ensuring that every student who travels under LU Send has an excellent experience regardless of who they go with. In similar fashion, a new department called LU Stages would be the filter for all spiritual life events on campus. So instead of different departments doing different events, one department, LU Stages, would be tasked with ensuring every on-campus event is done at an acceptable level of excellence. Finally, up top, LU Serve would be a completely reimagined vision of student service and how to account for it. LU Serve would be structured to account and reward all instances of students serving by replacing the 20 hours a semester system with a point system. LU Serve would determine and allocate every example of service a specific amount of points, and the graduate requirement would simply be a set amount of points. The value, though, would be that a student who serves often would accumulate points that in theory could be spent to earn added school benefits, such as a lower cost on a trip, or possibly even against student conduct points. Instead of one department, CSER, trying to determine who to partner with locally then, this department, LU Serve, would simply be the filter for any department in LU to submit service requests that would then be given a set amount of points. So those 3 departments would serve as administrative filters for every instance of student spiritual activity. If they are traveling, it's LU Send. If they're serving, it's LU Serve. If it's an on-campus event, it's LU Stages. If they are engines, then the departments beneath are fuel. They're the content creators. Starting at the bottom, a Center for Local Engagement would be the primary point of contact for all local spiritual service and activity. The Center for Domestic Engagement would be the primary point of contact and facilitator for all domestic activity. The Center for International Engagement would be the primary point of contact for all cultural engagement abroad. And the Center for Online Engagement would be the online platform tasked with sourcing all spiritual resources and activities offered to residential students and offering comparable resources for the online community. And in that middle tier are a reimagined vision of worship and spiritual mentors. or shepherds here at Liberty. Imagine a staff of spiritual mentors who are visible, engaged leaders on campus, not contained to any one box like local or domestic. They're available to all. Same with a worship collective. Instead of different bands with their own identity, like Exodus or Crimson Flood, why not one distinct worship collective that is available to the entire campus and is also promoting Liberty at a high level of excellence in their travel? One group called the Worship Collective, Different Expressions. Now notice in that new model, none of the previous 7 departments even exist, because instead of 7 different departments that are each responsible from conception to delivery for their own product, this model would divide up spiritual life into departments that each have a specific role in the process. It's one collective body working together at multiple different stages with an appropriate system of checks and balances. Why this model? Because it solves those 2 big problems we talked about earlier: consistent messaging and inefficient resources. There's not 7 departments shouting for attention anymore. There's one voice showing all the different ways students can get involved. And there's not inconsistent branding. There's one brand with multiple different expressions of that brand. In this new model, it's one body where the parts are all dependent on one another. That's the future of spiritual life at Liberty. It's cleaner, it's efficient, it's consistent. Perhaps most important, it's actually scalable to account for any number of students that pass through our doors. Because that's the ultimate goal. The goal is for every single student of Liberty to show up and be offered the same level of opportunity, access, and excellence when it comes to spiritual life and spiritual growth.